Those of you who got an invite, welcome to Nerd Prom.
No matter where in the world you are, we're all Nerds International. With the hyphen. Nerds International proudly presents...
We want to take you on a quest for knowledge. One that will take us from ancient medieval fantasy across the far reaches of space to the distant future. To many savage worlds.
Welcome to the Wild Eye Podcast, episode 52. This is a podcast dedicated to Pinnacle Entertainment's Savage Worlds, aimed at beginners and veterans alike. What's shaking, gentlemen? You're all looking rather svelte today, especially you, Lammer. You look like you need a shave, bro. What's going on over there?
Yeah, I'm due, but, once a week, that's about as often as I'm willing to shave.
Why do you two always start the podcast off with something so unbelievably boring? Like, you talk about the weather, how Eric needs a shave, what Eric's wearing. It sickens me. Genuinely, it sickens me.
Isn't that what normal people do? Small talk first?
But we're not normal. We're not normal, okay? We got a special guest on here, and you're talking about Eric's face. Nobody cares. Right, Eric, introduce Tommy. Hello, Tommy. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. I'm still waking up here, so...
Me too, man.
Yeah, it's still early. So, our special guest, and I hope I pronounce his last name right, Tommy Brownell.
Better than most people get it.
Yeah, all right. Well, he's the author of the most unread blog. If you've been around for a while, I mean, Tommy's been around for a while. All his reviews, Savage Worlds reviews, it's not only Savage Worlds, but he's a big fan, and that's why he's here, right? He's also a comic book writer, a former wrestler, and he does freelance work for Savage Worlds, including Savage Tales of Horror and Codex Infernus. And finally, also GM, husband, and dad. So, it's good to have him on the show. The reason why I wanted to invite Tommy on the show is because, it started with Harrison suggesting that we record an episode about making interesting characters for Savage Worlds. And I was reminded of this blog that Tommy wrote years ago called Savage Worlds Characters Are All the Same. Because he heard it on the internet, and if he heard it there, it must be true. So basically, I want to ask these guys and the rest of the panel too, how to make an interesting character for Savage Worlds, because I don't get to play much, and when I do, I suck. So don't listen to my my tips or advice about that. Harrison, before we get into that, how about a little bit of feedback?
Well,
and what we've been up to.
Feedback-wise, we've got a little apology to make, because we did have some feedback from Chris Fox. He sent us an email and said that when we took the Chris out of his name, that we f***ed up, and we shouldn't have done that. And so we just want to issue an apology to him, and I just want to say that I'm extremely sorry for all the stuff that we said. It was very immature and it was stupid, and we're not going to do that again. As somebody that has a stupid name myself, I'm very much aware of how it feels to have the piss taken out of you, so sorry about that, mate. Buy his book Buccaneers, it's really good, and that's all I'm going to say on the matter. Second of all, we had something in from Colin Kendrick. He says, Harrison Hunt, can the next Wild Die AP be Australian postmen trying to deliver packages while avoiding the deadly tricks of the outback? I want to hear Eric get punched by a kangaroo. I think somebody's disliked you there, Eric.
An unpopular figure on this show. It's all right.
The funny thing is that I don't know if that's quite wacky enough for my tastes. So I don't know about that.
Who doesn't want to see Eric get punched by a kangaroo? That sounds like a sexy time move.
That I just want to see that in real life. So yeah, I'll consider it, Carlin. Thank you very much. And we had one in from Christian Serrano, the man with the sexiest voice on the planet, and he says, regarding Kickstarter versus walking into a bookstore, the difference is the time limit. If I want to get the good deal and help the product actually exist, I need to back it within a specific cycle of my own personal budget. A bookstore, on the other hand, implies I can walk in any time to purchase the book. That's a very good point, because often a Kickstarter will come up when you've got no money and you have to back it within the time limit of the Kickstarter. So, whereas a bookstore might have it on their shelves for months and months and months. So, I think that's a fairly good point. What do you make of that, Gary?
Don't Kickstarters usually last a month? That gives you a lot of time to rob a store, convenience, liquor, your choice, gas station, beat up some kids for some change. You got an entire month most of the time.
Fair point. So
don't do that, people.
How long does it take to get to your mom's house and rifle through her purse for some spare change?
My mom lives in America, man. I don't know if I could get there in a month.
Oh, well, you could do a lot of panhandling in 30 days.
Or beating up kids. And to be fair, Eric, don't tell our listeners what to do. If you want to beat up kids, please do.
No, please don't.
This is the kind of thing.
Or ask Tommy to do it for you, because he's a former wrestler.
Yes, he is a licensed wrestler, and if he's beating up kids for entertainment purposes, then that's all right, right, Tommy? Can we get you on the record saying that?
But if I beat them up for entertainment purposes, they're probably not giving us money.
Rich Spainhour, he comes in. Great show, team. Enjoyed being part of the ep. 2 small corrections. It's pronounced like the country and the time period, because last episode we kept calling him Spanur. He says, I have never been, am not currently, nor ever plan to be a serial killer, because we kept on accusing him of being a serial killer. He says, I am, however, a former army officer and current mathematician. Yeah, you keep telling yourself that, mate. Both of these professions require attention to detail plus an analytical mindset. Bit like a serial killer. If I were a serial killer, I assure you they would never find your bodies. Cheers. I mean, I stand by what I said.
So we'll know what happened if you disappear for next show, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We're going to need a new co-host in a while.
Terry Hansen then comes in. He says, another great episode. Eric and Harrison, we need more grognard and sexy voices. It adds a nice level of delightful absurdity. Once again, Paris Conte, nice contribution to the show. I said it when the new format of The Wild Die came into existence, and I'll say it again. I love the fact that this show is so diverse and international. It speaks to the greatness of Savage Worlds and that it is spread all over the world. More so, it just shows that people are people and that we have so much in common despite geographical location. Thanks for your work, thanks for entertaining us, and for making the world just a bit better. P.S. Keep preaching the good word of rifts, Gary.
What else is going on?
Thanks, Terry.
No, nobody cares about Terry. That guy's a jerk.
He just complimented you, man.
Oh, sorry. I must have been thinking of somebody else. Hey, yeah, thanks, Terry.
So, good feedback. Thank you very much, and keep that coming. I really appreciate it. And it's good to know that we have, people that want to beat up children and serial killers and all sorts of people listening to the show. Isn't that right, guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I could think of nothing better than to be admired by serial killers.
Maybe we should stop doing feedback.
I heard that's the new tagline for Savage Worlds is Savage Worlds takes all kinds.
There you go. And that letter from Rich was sent to me, snail mail, with like little letters cut up from newspaper.
Yeah, and like
and magazines,
fingers and like bits of skin.
Yep. Oh boy! All right, a little bit of news.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the news. The news is incoming. Prepare yourself for the news. News! And some announcements about the Nerds International Network and the Wild Die podcast.
Well, we don't have a whole lot of news today, so I thought I'd remind people that we will be at Con on the Cob this year, November 8th through 11th. in Richfield, Ohio. So it was great fun last year, and we hope we see you this year. Big turnout. Come hang out with us. Come see the marvel, the 8 marvel of the world that is Gary, and have fun. Harrison's gonna be there. Yeah. I'll be there. Gary will be there, but Manuel is too good for that, so he's not coming.
Manuel's the sort of guy that wears a tie, and that sort of person, if they would just get destroyed. I mean, the thing is about Con and the Cob is it's only people that stink that are allowed there, and that's why we're going.
I think between 3 of us that are going, we could probably form some kind of side circus show. Harrison, if you grew a beard, you could be the bearded lady.
Yeah, there you go.
Lift all sorts of fake weights in my wrestling uniform that I'm going to get from Tommy, like my Andre the Giant spandex leotard thing, and then Eric can be the ringmaster.
Yep.
Good. So yeah, Con and the Cob, check it out on the website. It's going to be amazing. Hopefully there's going to be loads of really cool people there as well. Not just us, but other cool people such as Andy Hopp and I don't know who else. I don't know if you know who will be making a return appearance this year, but you know, it should be good. So
we'll see.
All right.
We shall see.
But anyway, as Eric mentioned, we are going to take it to the edge and talk about Savage Worlds characters.
Yeah. You're listening to the Wild Die Podcast. 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 Listen 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 to the Wild Die Podcast.
All right, we're taking it to the edge with a discussion about Savage Worlds characters. Maybe Harrison, you could share, what prompted you to suggest such episode. Why?
Well, recently I've been I play with the same group for years and years and years, right? And pretty much I feel like a lot of the time they knock out of the park with interesting characters. Now that's not 100% of the time. We all have crap characters from time to time. I mean, mostly me, because I tend to GM, and when I'm a player, I tend to play badly. All right, but the point is that I recently joined another group and did a bit of LARPing as well and things like this. And as great as those players are, I was at one of the games, and I really hope he doesn't listen to this, but he's playing a fantastic character, this guy anyway, and I'm not going to name him by name, but this guy was giving advice to another player on what edges to take when somebody leveled up. And this guy advised the girl to take hard to kill. And I said, would they actually be hard to kill? And his reasoning for this was, well, she doesn't want her character to die. And I was like, but that doesn't make any sense. I didn't say it because I'm a wimp, but that's what I thought. And I was thinking, it got me to thinking, like, when you're taking advances and leveling up, and when you're making your character, your edges and your stats and your skills and things like this, the way I tend to build characters and the way a lot of people that I know and a lot of decent players tend to build characters, those things tend to make sense. But then I feel like there tends to be people out there that tend to build them where they just play it as a player rather than a character. Do you know what I mean? And that was what got me to thinking. It's like, what I wanted to kind of do was hopefully have some sort of discussion where we talk about how to build an interesting character rather than one that's like, I want to build the most powerful character. Let's give every character Elan, hard to kill, and improve level-headed, and because it makes me win the most. Do you know what I mean?
Good enough. Yeah, it makes sense. I think some people call that munchkin or min-maxing,
Yep.
but maybe we should refrain from using those terms. I don't know. They got bad connotation, although they're not necessarily bad. But I think what you're trying to say is we're not trying to judge people for power gaming, but how they could take it to another level and make it even more fun for everybody around the table.
Mm-hmm.
I think Harrison hit on something very important there. Right off the bat, that's one thing that seems to me happens a lot. Is a group someone will find some combination that works, and so everyone goes, "Oh, I like that. That works." And so they're all taking the same edges, and the next thing you know, they're all complaining like, "Man, my character plays just like his character." Well, no shit, you made the same character. I mean, if you intentionally take the same edges, same skills, and make the same characters, all your freaking characters look the same.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, and that brings us to your article. Why did you write that article years ago? What happened?
Because I read a lot of people who, on the internet over the years, various forums, official Savage Worlds forums, RPG.net, the RPG site. They were complaining, Savage Worlds characters are all the same. Because, after however many levels, blah, 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 they all feel alike. And my experience, disclaimer, like I've never actually played Savage Worlds. I'm only a GM. But I've been GMing Savage Worlds for 10 years, give or take, with almost the same group of players every time in different campaigns. And they managed to make completely distinct characters every campaign. So, they're in 2 different Deadlands campaigns, we have no characters who are truly alike. So, I think there's a whole lot more here if you're just not pigeonholing your character into one thing. And so that's what I did with the articles. I took, I did 5 basic fantasy archetypes, 2 straight up combat guys, a ranged character, a wizard, and a kind of a charismatic face man. Built them as novice characters, and I ran the series all the way up into legendary, just to show ways you can mechanically distinguish each of these characters, each of these types in a playable way. And I even had somebody reply to my blog years later saying they basically played the face man, the charismatic talker, as I had laid him out, as I guess as a novice. I would assume over actual play he would have taken some different edges and skills and such than what I did, because that's the difference between leveling guys up as a thought exercise versus what happens in a game. Because when you're playing a game, you find your character. If you're playing your character, you find a character takes a different branch than you would expect. A skill becomes necessary that you wouldn't have thought, or an edge, fits your character more, whatever. But anyway, that was the reasoning behind the article, and what I wound up doing with it was I just wanted to show that you can build useful playable characters of different types. They don't all have to have improved level-headed to contribute to a team.
One of the things you said there is really really important, is that when I've played with groups that tend to build their characters in similar ways, to be fair to those people, they tend to role play them differently, which is all well and good. But one of the things I really really like about Savage Worlds is being able to distinguish your characters mechanically, and that's what you just said, is that you can distinguish them mechanically as well. So you can have 2 fighter types of characters that can feel so vastly different to each other. And in 5th edition D&D, for example, you're often going to end up with 2 fighter characters that feel very similar, because the game doesn't offer you much choice in that regard. Whereas in this, there's so much choice, and you can roleplay it differently and feel mechanically differently, and that's one of the things I love so much about it. So when characters tend to build the same characters mechanically, that's when I get kind of frustrated, because you can have such an elaborate backstory and then build characters that fit that. And sometimes you might end up with characters that are flawed in aspects that you wouldn't necessarily want, but they will excel in certain things. And that's what I really, really like about the system. And we've got characters on our team that, to be fair, in my Solomon Kane game, that are all competent fighters, because pretty much most people when they play this game will go, yeah, I've got to take some sort of fighting ability, and that's fair. I don't fault anyone for that, but the point is that they all fight in vastly different ways, because the edges and skills and things like that they take in are so completely different. There's not one character that fights in the same way, and that's what I enjoy about this system so much, that you can distinguish yourself mechanically. Every single person at another game that I've played has taken Ilan, because they all want that bonus whenever they spend a Benny, and it's just like, that's so boring. Because and like literally, I've seen somebody go, yeah, but you've got Ilan, right? Because this entire group like knows that everyone at that table is going to have it, because people literally say you should be stupid not to have it. And I've been the only person at the table without it.
Well, something you should also take into consideration is that some people build characters the way they were taught to build characters. And if they come from an environment where the GM is, I'm not going to say out to get you, but where the GM doesn't really take into account what kind of characters people make and just throws everything at them like it comes into his mind, then you end up with a group of people who just go for improved level-headed and Elan and improved first strike as fast as they can. I've seen that happen, and that's just a point where you have to sit down with people and be like, okay, I don't know what happened to you guys in the past. I've seen how you build your characters. Is this intentional, or is this because of something that happened in the past in other gaming groups? And now that and the way I'm going to run my game is I'm going to take a look at the characters you build and tailor the encounters to that. So it's going to be a challenge for the characters you build, and not a challenge that your characters have to overcome with whatever they can scrunch up, because I'm going to build the challenges my own way and everything besides that.
See, and it also could just be that the people at the table might have just learned from that one Munchkin player.
Yeah, true. Could also be that, because they were taught by somebody who maybe he just enjoys being the power gamer and doing stuff that way, because they just never saw another way of, they were never introduced to another way of building characters by just writing a backstory or just thinking of a backstory. A backstory doesn't have to be 10 bloody pages long. A backstory can be 5 sentences, it would be, and it can be really interesting, and then you can build on that. But if you've never been taught that, then how are you supposed to know?
See, one thing was in ICRPG, which I know is blasphemous to bring up another RPG on this podcast, is it says in that to start with an image. And that doesn't necessarily, although I think it actually does mean literally in that book, but I think it's a great way of putting it. And I think that it doesn't necessarily mean to start with a physical image, but that can be a backstory as well. You can paint an image with words, which sounds pretentious, but you can do that and just get down a couple of sentences first and start with that. And I always think that's a great way to go about it. But Gary, if you were to create a character in Savage Worlds and try to make it interesting in terms of flavour rather than just pure mechanics and power gaming, how do you go about it?
I usually just photocopy the guys next to me and then just put a different name on top of it.
That's one way to go about it.
It's the quickest way. If you need it, to make a character in a pinch, you go that route.
Good. Tommy, how about you, man?
Reading all these books that I reviewed over the years, I'm always finding cool edges that someone puts in there that sparks concept. I build a lot of my NPCs like PCs. I run NPC heavy games because I have small groups. And so, I'll find some cool little oddball edge that no one would probably ever seriously look at in a game, and then I'll build an NPC around that edge as kind of a concept. There's and this is going to be terrible because I don't have my books around me and my memory's failing me. But there's the one scavenger or something where you spend a Benny and you can find some useful item. I run a Solomon Kane game that has one PC and everyone else in the group is an NPC that the PC controls in combat and such. And so I saw the scavenger, and I created a little 10-year-old urchin thief who wound up joining the party for an adventure or two because I thought the edge sounded cool.
That's where I struggle. For me, creating characters, I have to know the campaign setting I'm playing in. When I don't, this is where I struggle. Sometimes I hit it right on I hit the nail, but I don't know. Like when we played the Gartar game, and it was Stevie Mermaid Spawn that I decided to play that character. That was goofy, and it started with inspiration from our dear friend Stefan Dragon Spawn, and yeah, I had fun with that and creating the various trappings for my powers. But I think it starts with a concept. That's when I have the most success creating an interesting character, is if I start with a concept. If I just start with a bunch of stats and then try to shoehorn some type of character into that's when it falls flat, like Kings of Convenience and my Jerry in there. I didn't like the character. He was boring as hell. And then I got the chair guy, which I had fun with. So because it started with a concept, because I had more information about the world we were in, the context of it. But, it's difficult. Some GMs just keep the campaign a secret, and you don't know what you're getting into, and then you make a character that doesn't fit the campaign well at all, and you're stuck with that character.
But I feel like Savage Worlds is really it feels like really organic for making interesting characters that aren't just a bunch of stats in the first place. Because as Manuel said, if you write down a tiny bit of backstory and then base your character on that, the way that the character creation tends to flow, at least even as written in the rulebook, for me anyway, tends to facilitate making an interesting character. Because if you start with the stats and then skills, edges and hindrances and things like this, well, the skills, you can pretty much make anything you want, because any background you want, you've got the knowledge skills there, right? So even if your character is, I don't know, you can think of the weirdest thing on the planet, like, I don't know, he works in a zoo, well, you put knowledge zoology down there or whatever. And then when it comes to edges and hindrances, I don't think I've ever been stumped for something that fits a character from any background, because they tend to be pretty decent, because you've got the open-ended ones such as quirk and things like this. But what about you guys? Do you feel like the character creation facilitates interesting characters, or have you ever felt stumped?
No, I mean I do, but I'll occasionally do articles on my blog, like half a dozen heroes, where I'll take a setting and I'll make 6 characters from a setting book. At different levels, novice or seasoned or veteran heroic, just to show off, hey, look, these are the kind of characters you can make in this setting, and I'll try to make it a point to show off some of the cool mechanical crunch, edges or hindrances that the authors have put in their books. And I've always found Savage Worlds to be very inspiring in that regard.
Yeah, here's a question then, because we're talking about edges, and most of the edges have some prerequisites, so like the rank or certain stats. Does any of you, like, when you'll make your character, you're gonna map out the whole advancement route all the way to legendary, so that you know that you want this edge at some point, but to get there you need to increase a couple skills or an attribute, or take another edge first? Do you do that?
I usually do that in the beginning, and then the actual game happens and the plan goes out the window, usually within the first 5 sessions. But nevertheless, I do that because it gives me an idea of where the character kind of wanted to go, because try to base that also on the background, on the backstory, and from there I try to extrapolate of where does this guy want to go, where does he want to be in 10, 15 years, and I try to have the edges and skills he takes to reflect that. And that's when reality happens and things in game and in the campaign happen. And usually that's going to lead to something completely different. In the Sundered Skies campaign we are playing, I'm playing a priest. And I just wanted him to be, he was just a novice priest when we began. And he wanted to explore that spirituality and everything. But then we got drafted into the campaign, and battle happened, and he understood that there's some things he could help his crewmates out with, but that ended up with him taking up archery and the marksman edge, and only came back to the priest stuff very late in the game, I think at heroic and early legendary. So yeah, you always have to adjust, not on the fly, but you have to adjust what you take and where you want to go to reflect the reality as it happens.
I'd agree with that. I always have an idea of where my character wants to go. One thing that I do, because I mostly GM, is a very quick way of doing it, is I always have two things to have in my mind how to roleplay NPCs, is what do they need and what do they want. And that's just a quick way of doing it, and also their edges and hindrances and things like this. But I always have that in mind whenever I play a player as well, and so that's reflected in how they want to advance, because as a person in life, if you're an ambitious person, you always know where you want to get to. But I pretty much 100% of the time spend my advances depending on what's happened in the game, because it'll be, if I'm spending an advance based on what they've learned, well then that's how I spend it. Because it's like when I was before one of my sessions, I was discussing with one of my players. We were spending his advances before the game because everyone had already done theirs, and we were like, okay, I just went around his for a cup of tea and said, okay, let's spend your advances now. We might as well do it so we can just get on with the game. And he said to me, can I take swimming? Because they knew they were about to fight a kraken the next game. And I was like, it's kind of meta. You've never done any swimming before. Why would you take swimming? And he's like, well, because I need it. And I'm like, mate, just look at your hindrances. And he's like, major phobia of water. And he's like, all right, cool, I'm not taking swimming. And like that's kind of the way that I do it as well. Is like, to me, an advance has to make sense within the story. If I okay it with the GM and I'll be like, my character wants to learn this, can he or she take a few days out of the campaign and go and learn it? Fine. But if I've already learned it in the course of the campaign, I can spend it right now. That's fine. That to me makes sense. But yeah, I think it always has to make sense within the plot. But of course I'll have an idea of where I want to go, because an ambitious character should. Whereas a character, say for example like Jerry, who you played in the Kings of Convenience, Eric, who was a bit of a layabout, bit of a lazy guy, a stoner, I don't know if he would necessarily have an idea of where he would want to go. And maybe his edges, his advances would be spent more randomly. But it should depend on the character, I guess.
Right, but I just think proactive characters make better characters overall than those that just, like you say, stay in the back and don't do much. You just talked about advances, and since we're mostly all GMs here, okay, so you've given an advance to your characters, or you awarded XP, and it's time for them to take the advance, however method you use. Do you find that when it's time to do that players have a choice paralysis to pick an edge, and they'll usually go for skills instead because it's simpler and they don't have to look through the book? Maybe start with Tommy there.
My players are pretty casual players, in the sense that if I ever got out of gaming, there's a real good chance they would all pack in their dice bags and not game again. So I always stay involved in the process, helping them out, giving them ideas, of stuff that can help them. And that's when they're not picking up on stuff in game, where they realize, an edge or a boosting a skill or an attribute is going to be helpful for them. Yeah, in Savage Worlds, unless a skill becomes an issue, they tend towards edges. I will say, to veer off into another system, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, they when it comes time to choose between attribute increases or feats, almost to a person, they completely ignore the feats list, don't have time for it. And in the 5th edition, feat list is a hell of a lot smaller than it was in earlier editions. But yeah, for whatever reason, Savage Worlds are all about the edges. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, they just boost their ability scores and go on.
One thing that I think helps, though, in Savage Worlds with that a little bit is the Edge's summary page is much easier. I haven't actually played 5th edition, but back in Pathfinder days with the feeds, that page was extremely long and extremely not extremely confusing, but a little bit more confusing. Whereas the Edge's summary, for me, that's so easy to get, and you pass it to a player. A lot of them are very easy to read, and if they're not, they're very easy to look up. And as a GM, I've been through that book so many times that I've memorized enough of them that if a player says to me, "What edges would you recommend for my character?" I can be like, "This, this, and this," and then we can move on. A lot of times, my players at the beginning were picking skills, and I said, "Guys, don't forget about edges, because edges are the real game changers." And now, like you said, a lot of the times they'll pick edges because they know that these things are game changers. One of my guys just got really dirty fighter, and pretty much he hoards bennies and uses really dirty fighter all the time because he loves it. Well, getting the drop on an opponent by describing an awesome attack, it's a game changer. It's awesome. And describing a really awesome attack and having it happen, they love it. So it's like things like that. Now players are like, I want to meet the requirements for an edge and get an edge, and now suddenly they're having plans for what they want to get later on. And yeah, it's awesome. And I think that a lot of that is down to the fact that how well organized it is. But again, it comes down to like the players, it being part of their character and stuff like this.
Just to piggyback on what Harrison said there, my face-to-face group moved to Roll20 a while back because half of them moved across the country. And so now when we play the Savage Worlds games, I'll do a Google spreadsheet of basically the edge summary sheet, edge and hindrance summary sheets, because they're half my player. Only my son is in the same room as me now. Everybody else is at their computer, so they can pull it up anytime to look at the edges and hindrance summary sheets to see what they want to do. Yeah, and I think that really, really helps.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like also the hindrances are definitely a massive, massive help to role-playing in Savage Worlds too, because I mean, I used to be a little bit down on them back in the day because I thought they're a little bit simplistic towards role-playing, but I think it's a good start, especially in a long campaign. You get the hindrances, and there's a very, very quick summary on the page, and they'll give you like a good start as to how to play your character. And in a campaign where you have a guy that starts off as, let's say for example, you got the cautious edge, hindrance, sorry. Last session in our Solomon Kane campaign, we had this guy who was playing the cautious one. Nick, he's playing a character called Captain Bill, who's not a pirate, but like a sailor dude. And it led to some really, really interesting roleplay. And I used to be the guy that was like, yeah, back in my day, we didn't need hindrances to roleplay, we just roleplayed. But actually, it starts you off getting on that, and then characters develop more complex stuff from that. But then if you're playing a one-shot, well, it just gives you a couple of pointers and then it's cool. But after that, I think, yeah, it tends to get much better. And as I've said, I'm often wrong about stuff on this podcast, and that's one of the many things I've been wrong about. But yeah, I think that's another really interesting thing. But do you guys find that people tend to pick munchkins specifically, but a lot of people tend to pick the same hindrances as in the safe ones?
Loyal.
Yeah.
Heroic.
Yeah.
I don't know what the temperature is here, so if you need to bleep his name or something in the podcast, you can. But Sean Fannin wrote a supplement recently, Savagely Useful, like Rise of a Hero or something like that. And I love random tables, love them to death. And so for when we started doing our Savage Pendragon game, I had everybody use the random tables in there. And, they give you, like, little basic stuff, like, it might give you a skill or an edge or something. But at the end of the book, there's card draw tables to determine your minor hindrances. And while my players are generally real good about picking hindrances that fit their characters, I've one of my players, he's kind of the alpha personality of the group, and he's always, just a big scrappy badass. And one of his minor hindrances wound up being pacifist. And I gave him the option of backing out of it. I said, if it's too uncomfortable for you, if it's too outside your comfort zone, feel free. I'm not going to hold you to it. I want you to have fun. But he thought it over. He went with it. We're only a session into our Savage Pendragon game, but it's a total game changer for his entire role in the group, because he's normally the guy who can take a punch and go, F you, I can do this. Now he's playing a pacifist because of the Savagely Useful table. And that was just kind of a cool experiment with these with the new campaign, having everyone taking their minor hindrances off a random table.
Yeah, and I like it when I see players take genuinely interesting hindrances. That's not to say that heroic and loyal aren't. I just don't think I tend to see people play them in genuinely interesting ways that often. Now, like, when, for example, in our Kings of Convenience campaign, when Gary chose pacifist, and pretty much for the whole campaign, like, every single combat action he did, not every single combat action, but every single action he took when combat was happening, was interesting, because he couldn't fight. And maybe only 2 times in the whole campaign he actually shot anything. And it was because he was absolutely forced and was absolutely furious. And that was fun. That to me was way more fun than somebody picking heroic and going, I'm a hero, I'm going to slay thou. And it's like, yeah, that to me is way more interesting. And yeah, I love when people take the interesting ones. And I'd like, for example, to see somebody play a blind character just once. Just a cool blind character. But I haven't seen it yet, and I was desperately, when James, one of the guys at my game, his recent character died, I was desperately trying to convince him to play a samurai.
No, but Gary, I mean, you've got to have something to say, right? I mean, every time you roleplay, you got funny characters, you got fun characters at least. So how do you do it? Do you look at the rules of what you pick, the hindrances, edges, and all that, or you just go goofy?
Thanks, man. All my characters are just dumb. No, I've got a lot to say, but we have a guest. You guys can listen to me anytime, ramble on. Couple of things that I've been sort of mulling over. Don't write a backstory for your character. I think that's absolutely dumb. The only person that's going to read your character sheet is you. The one instance I had with somebody that had written a backstory, it was like pages long, and we're doing a 5th edition D&D campaign. I'm really flexible as a GM, so if you want to bring in crazy characters, that's fine. He wanted to bring in an anime furry that could teleport from worlds, had claws, and was a monk, and all sorts of crazy shit. And he had written like a 3 or 4 page backstory. And it was just like, nobody's going to read this. Like, if you want to play an interesting character, I know this is character creation, but if you want to make an interesting character that everybody can enjoy, act it out. I know that, it's called role-playing for a reason, not just because you roll the dice, but because you can actually play that kind of a character. Role-playing games are a great way to exercise social skills, where you can just sort of come out of your shell and be a bit of a nutter. So when you're creating a character, just think of somebody maybe somebody somebody you've seen in a TV show or something like that. One of the funnier people that I've seen. I don't know if you guys have seen that the YouTube thing with the lady that's in the fire. She's like, "Ain't nobody got time for that." I don't know if you know that on YouTube.
Welcome to 10 years ago.
Right? So you just pick somebody dumb like that sticks out in your mind and just play that character. And if other people at the table look at you funny, they're all getting a chuckle and they're all just jealous anyway, which is usually why I like to play fat dudes that take their shirts off all the time. So it's kind of my character.
Here's the only thing. There's 2 reasons I would recommend writing down a backstory, and I agree, no one will read it. However, the only trouble is that sometimes writing down a backstory is good for 2 reasons. A, it's good for me and my very specific situation because I suffer from memory problems and I forget stuff. B,
sure.
Sometimes if you are the type of player who is known for coming with uninteresting characters, then with one-note things, with one-note backgrounds and one-note type of personalities, then writing stuff down will help you to make a more fleshed out character, and that's definitely going to help. And I'm certain there are people out there who've come to a game with an idea that they think is fleshed out, and when they've sat down, they've got it's turned out to be one note, and they've gone like, holy crap, I thought this character was really cool and deep, and then suddenly they're actually just completely one note. Whereas if you write it down, sometimes you can read it back and be like, holy crap, this needs fleshing out, and then you can add bits.
So what I would say to that is you can do that in a different way. Like a backstory is like a story. If you want to write something down because you have memory issues, you could get away with it in one word. I think Manuel said it best when he's talking about his priest that went off and took archery and did all this other stuff and then came back to his priest. A lot of times when you sit down to play a game, you have an idea for a character and then story takes over and your character sort of has to sort of blend into that story because you rolled into a town of sick children and now you have to go on this quest to find, some sort of healing thing for it. But maybe you're like just a dumb fighter and now you got to figure out what kind of a mushroom you need to go pick, or do you know what I mean? Like story can actually affect your character. So he had to come back around from being a fighter guy back into a priest, and that's because the story sort of took over. That's why I would say don't write a backstory. If you need to know how your character plays because you forget, just write down notes about what your character, just little one words. At least that way you're not pigeonholing yourself into a story that you have to, like your water phobia guy that wanted to go swimming. Maybe he needed to write down he was afraid of water.
Yeah,
and then
I feel like your life experiences before you turned up make you who you are, and I feel like that to me is like kind of important. That's all. But I don't know. It's just that I feel like a lot of people just get into this one thing where they turn up and their character is nothing except for what they are when they turned up at that minute. You get me?
Yeah, I would say that's common. Yeah, absolutely. Most of the players that I play with are like that. They show up, sit down, and roll dice, and that's it. This is the podcast about how to make an interesting character. And that's why I would say more role play it out loud so that interest is sort of, spray your interest on the table in the faces of all the other players, so to speak, instead of just putting on your page.
One of the things I learned from doing the actual plays in the style that we do it as well is often instead of like a lot of people would discuss what they're doing in the game out of character as well, and you can one really really easy way to add depth to a character is to discuss it in character. So if you're going to do something, don't say to the rest of the party, hey, do you reckon we should do this? Say it in your character's voice and keep in mind your hindrances and what's happened up until that point. And then it will just make your character infinitely more interesting. And keep in mind their stats as well, their smarts, their spirit. Do they have a lot of spirit and smarts? And bear that in mind. So when we were doing the actual plays, for example, it wasn't you, Gary, saying, hey, what do I think we should do? It was Pindunda saying, hey, what do I think we should do? And things like this.
Right, and that can get into metagaming versus in character role playing. Because yeah, if you're saying, hey Gary, how do we want to raid this castle? But if I'm playing a thief, I'm like, hey guys, I'm going on ahead. You take care of that front gate. I'll meet up with you later. And then I'm sneaking off because I want my cut of the treasure before you guys get it, what have you. And that just makes for a more interesting in-game dynamic, I think, if you're looking at it from the perspective of your character. As far as backstory and interesting characters, 5 pages of backstory for an interesting character is only interesting if the backstory is interesting. Mm-hmm. If you give me a 2-sentence hook that just captures the vibe of the setting or something that's going to mesh well with the rest of the group, I'm good, man. I can work with that as a GM, but if you give me 5 pages of backstory, that everything about your character's history to before they showed up in the game, there better be something good in there, or I'm gonna give you a pat on the shoulder and go on.
Yeah, this is why I quite like the archetypes that that Pinnacle gave out for the Lankmar setting, because the backstories on them are really short, and if you hand those out at a one shot, people can read those. They're quick. They don't include a lot of colloquialisms and things like this, and yeah, anyone can get them pretty quickly. It's just like, hey, this guy, he's a ghoul. He's pretty self-explanatory. Look at him. Get on with it.
So I'm one of those guys that believe that you flesh out your character through their action during the game. Until I've played that character, the choices I make, I don't really have a character. And like Tommy said, the hooks. As a GM, that's something that I'm looking for from a player. For them to give me a hook for their character, because I want to give them spotlight. I want to create character arcs around those hooks, so that they feel like they're part of the campaign and not just a visitor in the campaign that walks along and takes care of things. But something that I've noticed, I don't like to label people, but I've noticed 2 trends where you've got the people that feel like character creation is playing the game, where their whole character is in their head and they've already played out that character. It's already complete. There's nothing more to do with that character. And then those are the ones that will write 5 pages backgrounds, because they don't even know the campaign, but they've already lived their whole life, which, I mean, that works if maybe you start at seasoned or veteran rank instead of novice. But if you're a novice character, you should be a brand new adventurer. You should be just starting out, so you don't have all that background. And then you have the players, like I said, like me, are mostly, all right, I got a vague idea of what my character is about, and then I'll just play it, and the campaign itself will help determine who my character is, what his place is in the campaign.
But then you got to have something, right? Otherwise it's nothing. I mean, for example, with my recent character in Wiseguys, demo kit available now, Drive-Thru-RPG. That character, I didn't come up with like 5 pages, right? But there is a good balance, right? Because you got to have something, some backstory to inform the campaign. For example, when I came in, we just done a massive chase scene, right? Because this is like a gangster setting. My previous character, Winston, had died, and I made a new character, Bob the Slob, right? And all my backstory was a hook. It was a good way of getting him in, but I did go into like some detail, just not excruciating. I wanted him to be a guy that knew the party already, that had worked with them on a previous job, and but I wanted to give some background where he was the type of guy that would steal off anyone, but there was honor amongst thieves. That was his kind of thing, because my previous character did nothing but screw over the party, and I just didn't want another character like that. So I kind of like give him some background like that, because like you said, Eric, his background is like his character builds up when the game starts. I agree, because that's when the other players meet him and when the GM meets him. But the fact of the matter is that Bob was, but he had to be something before he got there, and that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, like I said, you had an idea of who that character was, but it wasn't until during we're playing and then you were making your character and all that, and you'd sent me a concept before, but it wasn't until he found his place in the campaign that he was more fleshed out. Like you know who he was, but then you guys, the rest of the party, just had a chase. They end up in a back alley, and there's like hobos out there about to attack him, and that's when I decided, all right, your character is the leader of those hobos, and then that helped fleshed him out because of something that happened within the campaign. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah, I agree. And then that's when the character actually becomes meaningful, I guess. Because before that, yeah, a backstory is basically meaningless because it doesn't affect the game. And the game is the actual meaningful part. One thing that you hit on there, Eric, is what GMs can do to make characters more interesting. Because sometimes a player will come to the table and have something that's a bit of a duffer. And the fact of the matter is that you, as the GM, it's all well and good sitting there and complaining and going, oh, this character's rubbish, and bitching about that person and going, oh, I wish they made a better character and all of this. But the thing is, sometimes that player might just need a bit of encouragement in the right direction, you know, just to roleplay a bit better and flesh out a bit better. And what do you guys reckon are some little tips you can do to help that player along?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think as the GM, if you're just telling your players, you know, make your characters show up ready to play, and they're making, you know, a character that doesn't fit, and then you're not helping them massage that concept into the campaign. I'm not saying change their concept, but massage the concept into the campaign, and then you're complaining about their characters. It's your fault as the GM. You know, if this is actually an example when I actually was a player in a Deadlands Classic game, but my character was a U.S. Marshal who was blessed. One of our players was a deputy. He was a Native American that I had deputized, and then we had a tin horn from back east that was he was with us because, you know, it's a role playing game and you just kind of shrug your shoulders sometimes and let the character come along. But another player was joining the game, and he wanted to play a mean as a rattler, wanted level 5 stone cold killer. And I had to pull him aside and say, you're going to be dead in 5 minutes. We're going to kill you. My marshal had a quickness of 5d12. I was popping off 5 attacks in a round, sometimes before my opponents had a chance to do anything. And, you know, so I helped him massage that concept into a character who had a severe chip on his shoulder because really shitty things happened to him in the past that he was framed for. And so now he's no longer a stone cold killer. He's a guy who hates the world but wasn't in the wrong. So I can, especially playing on the Christian side of my character, I can then find a way to empathize with that and turn it into an interesting way to meld him into the group instead of us just going, oh, he's wanted, we're lawmen, he's dead. So
yeah, that's a really, really good point. And Eric, you do something that I think is like really, really genuinely interesting that I thought is an incredibly easy way and a very, very good thing to do in Savage Worlds, where if you you don't have to do this just for characters that you don't think are that fleshed out or whatever, but it does work as well. And I do it for any character. But let's say, for example, if you have a character that is at the table that's not that fleshed out and you don't think it's got that much detail to it, Well, you can do a flashback at the beginning of the game. So, Eric, do you want to describe how that works?
Well, it's a movie cinematic method, really. If you've ever watched a movie, you know they have flashbacks where, you find out a bit more about a character. And what I'll do, and so that nobody else at the table has nothing to do, is, well, example, we were playing Wiseguys, and one of the character played by Alan, he's Frank the Stein. He's a big goon, former boxer, and because we have a big group of 6 characters, 6 players, sometimes not everybody gets a spotlight. So I wanted to give him the spotlight. So we started a scene that was like years ago, probably when he was younger. I think I had like 17 years ago, and he was just practicing training in the gym when 4 goons walk in and want their money back from him because he was supposed to go down in a fight and he didn't. So now the rest of the group are playing those extras, those goons. So they have a character to play. It's not theirs, but they're playing a character, and their job is to help that character, the main character, Alan, Frank the Stein, flesh out his character. So, and as a reward after the scene, I give everybody a Benny for playing out that scene, for being kind enough to play a different character, which isn't something that everybody wants to do. But at first I had difficulties with that, and I think I missed the mark on it, and where players didn't like it. But over time, it's gotten better, and that was one of the most fun scenes we've played in that campaign. So I like it. I mean, you have to pick your spots. You can't do it all the time, or too much. But once every maybe 5 sessions is a good ratio, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and it also led to some inspiration with me as well, where if, say, for example, some characters have been captured and other characters haven't, you can have some people play extras for a little while, and it's something I never really thought of doing. And I did it the last Solomon Kane game I played. I just made a couple of extras for people to play. It's besides the point, but I just wanted to slide this in there. But we had 3 characters got captured one session and 2 characters didn't. So when we started the next session, the 2 characters that were still there were wading through the jungle trying to get to where they'd been captured by these tribesmen. And this like really posh British explorer called Professor Elemental, and his monkey that he captured, which was literally Donga from 50 Fathoms, and then his butler also joined them and started coming through the jungle with them, which I know isn't really in the spirit of Solomon Kane, but I had to give them something fun to play while they weren't playing their main characters. So it's kind of cool, and like, yeah, I love the flashback thing. So I did it recently because I said to my mate James, his character, he's playing a sorceress called Belinda, and she is a very good character. The only trouble is that she'd been in the party for a couple of sessions, and she was linked to one of the other characters. They used to have a romantic relationship, and we didn't really get her yet, and we weren't really getting her character, where she fit into the group, what her personality was, things like this. And it would be really easy just to go, oh, your character's rubbish, James. Like, we don't get her motivations, we don't get this, you're role-playing it bad. But the reality of the situation was just that, as Eric said, she hadn't really had the chance to have the spotlight yet. And perhaps because of the situations they'd been in, where it was always high action, always investigating, we hadn't really had the chance to see her personality like we had the other players. So what we did is I employed your tactic, Eric, and just took a step back, did a flashback where we went into the past, where we saw her relationship with Balthazar, one of the other characters, where they were on a date, and Balthazar's boss saw them on the date and had to tell Balthazar to kill her because he knew that she was a witch, and that was kind of like a really fun role-playing thing, because she got discovered for being a witch and all of this stuff, and we also got to see them on a date just being regular human beings, and so she got to just role-play being a normal person for a bit and fleshed out a character for a bit, rather than just seeing them always in the action and her always having to just be not herself. And it really works. So I think it's a really good tip. If you have a character at the table where you're just like, I don't get this character, try doing that, and then you get to see them in a normal situation. I mean, it's what Quentin Tarantino does, isn't it? He puts characters in normal situations, because in real life, that's where you get to learn about people.
I was just thinking while you guys were talking about that, what a great way to start a campaign. You know how they say, like yesterday I was trolling Google like I do all the time, and there was a new DM asking a question about how to get characters, like, I can't remember what the question is now, but essentially the gist of it was like, how do you sort of mesh your characters together to become a party or something along those lines? And I'm thinking to myself, this would be a great way to do that. If you started your group, you know, you got your 5 characters, and then just for the first 5 sessions or so, you just pick a player and you go into the backstory, but pick a point in time where the party meets or something like that. Let's just say, for example, they meet at a tavern. You're sitting down having a drink, and these 4 blokes walk in, but these 4 blokes are your party members, and some dude comes over and starts picking on you because you're like a wimpy mage or something like that. And then you do this flashback scene to where these 4 guys helped you out or something like that. Maybe you're the ranger guy, and you got trapped in the woods, and you know, your leg's broken because you stepped in your own trap because you're a crappy ranger or something, and you know, this party rolls through and saves you from this attacking band of goblins or something like that. I think it's a great idea to bring the party together. If your party's not interconnected some way, either through blood relationships or past adventures, you don't really care about the other players so much. So when that thief does something dumb, like tries to steal your stuff, you just want to kill him. Like, you know, there's no reason to keep him around because you know that he stole your goods. So I think that's a great idea.
This is why I think we have a rule in our Solomon Kane campaign at the moment is new characters that show up always have to be connected to the party in some way, because having that connection always informs people, A, to make decent characters, and B, to have... I think it makes for better roleplay as well. I don't think it has to be a rule in every campaign, but I think that it definitely... It's been nice in this campaign, especially in a campaign that's about a big journey.
I gotta say, I miss Blelvis, man. He was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I miss him too. That was my Wiseguys campaign character for anybody that's listening. He was a black Elvis impersonator.
Here's a question. So... well, I know Tommy hangs out on Facebook, the official Savage Worlds group over there, and I'm not going to name his name, but there's a guy on there that believes that edges and hindrances aren't part of the core of Savage Worlds, and
that guy, man.
You only need skills and all that. And you know what? Maybe other players or people new to Savage Worlds don't understand that, but what would you say to people that don't think edges and hindrances are part of the core?
There are a lot of great games you can go play.
Go play Shadowrun. Shadowrun is based basically purely on skills. You have advantages and disadvantages, but you can just rip them out, and it works perfectly well. Just go play Shadowrun and slap some fantasy on it. If you want to play fantasy, you can do that with Shadowrun as well. Works perfectly fine. 4th edition Shadowrun is a really decent system. But yeah, I think that's mostly coming from people who come over from systems where the equivalent of edges and hindrances are just basically tacked on things, or they feel like they've been tacked on to either fill the needs of people who want them, or just generate points for you to spend at character creation. So you can have more of those skills or pump some more points into resources if you have to buy your starting resources with points, like, for example, in Shadowrun. And the way you can really easily well, not convince, but show people to how important edges are. You just show them the professional skills, and then you fire up any dice, and you show them a simple calculation of how many rolls you're going to succeed with a standard D6 and how much you're going to succeed with a D6 plus 2. I believe off the top of my head, it's like something in the 25 or 30% success chance increase with one edge. And of course, professional edges don't stack, but they can apply to other situations where they stack with different edges, which are not professional edges, and give you abilities you can't do with a skill. There is no skill that gives you a second attack. There is no skill that lets you attack everyone around you. And I know that some people have been arguing over and over that those could be should actually be maneuvers, but well, they are not. Maybe they will someday, but right at this point they are not.
Man, I'm really disappointed that not one of you said talk to the hand, 3 snaps in a Z, pirouette, and walk away.
In my opinion, if you're having fun at the table, then you're doing it right. That's how I feel about it. However, 100%. You are wrong. If you're doing it that way, no, I'm just kidding. If you're having fun at the table, you're doing it right. That's all I say. You can mod this however you like. The only thing is I feel like edges are so fun, man. I don't get the people that mod it out because they're so cool. I just don't get it. Like as far as I see, like when you get an advance after getting XP and you get to spend it, and you get to buy an edge, and then you get to buy the more advanced version of that edge, it changes your character in such a fundamental way that the things that you get to then do are so much fun that why would you strip that out? Why would you strip that out? Because it's one of the most fun things in the game. It's like, I can now do this thing that nobody else in the party can do, and it's like, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. Yeah. Why would you strip that out? To me, that's one of the most fundamental things in the game. I think that guy that you're talking about, Eric, I think he also doesn't use any of the combat maneuvers as well. And it's just like, he's just playing, I don't know, if we're talking about the same guy, he's a nutcase. And I think he might be a troll.
Could be. What people tend to forget is you can slap trappings on everything in Savage Worlds, on every bloody thing in the book. I played it was a short campaign. I think we played like 5 or 6 sessions in something that was like, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, back when Mutant Year Zero didn't exist, but it was basically an idea like Mutant Year Zero. And one of the guys I was playing with, he played a mutant, and he had a hindrance that was Big Mouth. And the hindrance was trapped as a second person who was fused into his body. So he literally had another person on his back who was protruding from his upper back and his left shoulder, and the guy was basically only a head and had one arm, and that was his trapping for the Big Mouth hindrance because he couldn't get the guy to shut the up.
I like that.
And he expanded on that with over the course of the game, they came to a sort of arrangement. And when he took the first strike edge, that was not him attacking, but that was the guy on his back, literally stabbing people who came too close to his character. And when he took sweep, that was when the guy on his back actually discovered, hey, if I take this chain and put some hooks into it, I can hurt more people at the same time. And it was amazing. Those were just standard edges. A few other guys had the same edges, but he made them unique just by applying trappings. And you can do that, and you should do that.
Agreed.
What's the hindrance where when you get a club, you got to make like a knowledge check or something like that, or you just start spewing off like, I can't remember what it's called, but you just stand there and you're just like, you tell the guy basically what you're going to do to him.
That's evil that's Monologer. That is from the Superpowers Companion. I've actually seen that being used in a modern game with some supernatural stuff. And one of the guys was playing a black guy who was basically is escaping from a really bad place, and he had been raised in the gangs, and he had taken that hindrance. So every time that came up in the first round, he was going all ghetto gangster on the bad guys, and it was so funny.
Yeah, it's got to be one of the greatest ones. Hopefully, they add that into the Black Edition because that's top notch.
Yeah.
I think that sounds like it should be a core one because that sounds awesome.
Hey, what about when you create a character? Do you spend your maximum allowed number of hindrances to start with? 1 major, 2 minor, always, or you just go with whatever your character concept is? Or sometimes do you even take more hindrances but without getting the points just to flesh them out better?
I've never taken more than the maximum allotment for hindrances, but I try my best to find either core hindrances or hindrances from other books if they fit into the setting, or just apply trappings to the hindrances to make them fit the setting and the character. Because I feel like even if I don't remember them all the time, if I have all 3 of them, it gives me a better idea of the downsides of the character, of what makes him fallible. And if I have all 3, the chances are higher that I'm going to remember at least one of them per session.
Yeah, I tend to always pick the maximum. I mean, the thing is, I feel like pretty much everyone in the world is going to have that amount of flaws, right? So yeah, I'm gonna pick them. It makes sense, right? How about you, Tommy?
As a GM, I'm a big fan of letting people respec after a couple of sessions if they, pick the maximum hindrances. If something's just not working, it sounded like a good idea at the time, but you get to the table and a session or 2 in, maybe arrogant totally was what you had in mind, but it's not what you are feeling when you're at the table. Drop it, we'll swap it out for something else. One of my players in ETU tried really hard to use Doubting Thomas, and I mean, it was like 4 sessions in, and he was having a hard time trying to keep rationalizing everything as not being supernatural. So he said, "Hey, how about I drop it?" Now he plays with delusions because basically his hyper-rational mind snapped at the realization of the supernatural, and so now he just goes on completely oddball tangents that about the weirdness of the world, and it's one of those things where he had an idea that he thought worked, but he couldn't figure out how to make it work in play. So we let him swap it out. So
that's a great idea.
Doubting Thomas is probably one of the harder hindrances to play. Remember too that if you're new to Savage Worlds, if you play a hindrance in a way that negatively affects your character, for example, let's say what would be a good one here, like taking small. Sure that it gives you a -1 to your toughness, but it really doesn't sort of hinder you in a way like Curious would. Let's use Curious for an example. You hear a knock behind the door or something maybe moves in the other room, and you want to play your Curious hindrance, and you go running in without really sort of drawing your weapon or any of that kind of stuff, because you have to. You have to see what's in there, and it puts you in some kind of negative dire straits. Those are pennies, man. Those are penny points. Big Mouth is another good one too. You start blabbing and saying something dumb to some guy that maybe your party's going to talk their way out of, and all of a sudden you're flapping your gums like an asshat, and it's battle time.
Oh, Curious can be a death trap, man. I mean, I seen it. No, this was in a GURPS game, but in GURPS somebody had Curious, and they heard what the player knew was a bomb beeping in a drawer under a kitchen counter, but he was like, my character's curious, man. He rolled knowledge. He didn't know what it was. Well, the character didn't know what it was, and he's like, I've got to check it out. He opens the drawer, he blows up. That character was alive for 5 minutes. For entire game time, and he died. The whole house blew up. He
Well,
was dead. Everyone else got out of there. He was like, I've got to know what it is. And yeah, that's a good one. But you see, somebody plays heroic, and he's like, of course I'm going to go and save the princess. It's like, yeah, but all the other characters were going to do it too. But they were doing it for the money. They were doing it for this. They were doing it for that. It's like, I don't know if that's worth a penny. I don't know if that's worth a penny because you're doing it because you're heroic. Oh, well, done. Like, everyone else is doing it anyway because they're doing it because they want to further the plot or because their dad was killed by monsters in their backstory or because this or because that. But you're doing it because you've got that lame-ass hindrance. Well done. I don't know.
Well, loyal and heroic are hindrances that, in a lot of settings, they're just kind of implied. But you play a setting like Ravenloft or something, and loyal and heroic can get nasty real fast for somebody because there's a difference between, I'm going to go help out this town, this town that's being attacked by a monster, and I can't stand to let the oppression these people are facing from that big sumbitch up in the castle ride out. And that, sometimes the impact of a hindrance has a lot to do with the setting that it's in, and not just the hindrance in and of itself.
I'd agree with that, because Necessary Evil and Saga of the Goblin Horde are two that come to mind where it's not implied in the setting.
Yeah. Should we wrap this up?
Yeah,
I think going on for an hour and a half.
A good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I hope the people listening at home have gleaned some good tips for this. I know we were sort of bouncing from topic to topic here, but I think it was an absolute pleasure to have Tommy on.
We always.
Exactly, and we've hopefully given you guys some good tips about creating interesting characters. And if I see anybody create a character that's not interesting ever again, I will kill you, because I'm neither heroic nor loyal. All right, I will absolutely murder you. Understood?
So you're bloodthirsty, vengeful, and delusional.
Yes, and I have quirk murderer.
It can't be a Wild Eye podcast episode without Harrison threatening to kill someone.
It's because I've become quite good mates with Rich Spainhour.
Preferably threatening the audience.
Alright guys, let's wrap this up.
Yo motherfuckers, you all best back up. I always got a gun, I always come strap up. This ain't a game of pool, it ain't no time for no rack up. It's the motherfucking time for the wrap up. Anyone who disagrees will get smack up. See me back in school when I shouldn't have learned to add up. Found a gun on the floor, instead I picked that up. Anyway, sorry, I'm motherfucking back up. What I'm trying to say is it's time for the wrap up. Yeah, this one goes out to all the ladies and all the men out there. Everyone in the front row, grease up. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I assume you guys have played this Elder Scrolls games, Oblivion, Skyrim.
Wrap up.
Yeah.
Skyrim, yeah.
I remember once I was playing Oblivion and I killed a wolf and searched its inventory and it was holding a spoon. So how the f*** did that happen?
Somebody stabbed it with a spoon?
I guess so. I don't f***ing know.
They've been trying to shit that spoon out for a week.
But it just got stuck, so you probably did the wolf a favor. Put it out.
I'm sure that happened to Gary before.
Yeah, we've all been there. You get drunk, you think spoon is a food, always happens.
When I was a kid, when I was maybe 13, 14, we were playing in the back of the school grounds and we were wrestling. It was me and two of my buddies. I'm 6'4", like 400 pounds. I think I was 393 this morning because I'm back in my diet again. So anyways, my buddies are all normal size. They're all like I'm 13 years old. I'm 6'3", 280 pounds. And my buddies are all 5'6", 5'5", maybe 120 pounds. So it was usually two or three of them against me. We're playing in the back of the schoolyard and we're wrestling around shortly after Easter. And by shortly after, I mean probably like 3 to 4 weeks after Easter. And we're screwing around on the ground and I look over and there's part of an Easter bunny, like a solid milk chocolate Easter bunny. And by part, I mean like half. It was probably laying out in the ground for like 2 weeks. I'm like, Easter bunny. And I just started eating it while we were wrestling. So yeah, I've eaten some and shit out some pretty crazy stuff in my time.
Right, anyway. So Tommy, is there anything you would like to plug while you're here? Any websites, any wrestling careers?
No, my wrestling career was pretty unmemorable. Yeah, I blog occasionally still at the most unread blog on the internet ever. That would be, I can remember my own address, mostunreadblogever.blogspot.com. And I write comic books occasionally. You can find most of those at indieplanet.com. Just search Tommy Brownell and my comics will pop up.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Eric,
Awesome.
You've also got something to plug as well, and for once, it is not your bottom.
Thank you.
Maybe it is his bottom.
Nothing would make you more happy, huh, Gary? Oh boy. Yeah, shameless plug here. I've been talking about it on the show quite a bit over the past few months, and on this show again, Wiseguys, we released the demo kit for Wiseguys earlier this week, so it's available on DriveThruRPG for free because it's a demo kit. Yeah, it happens that Mr. Tommy here was the lead editor on this product, so that's another plug right there.
If it sucks, you're blaming him. Is that what you're saying?
That's fair.
Look at that.
Yeah, I gave him all the headaches of having to fix my bad English and all that stuff and the rules. But no, it was great to work with him. I've been wanting to work with him for a while, so finally had the occasion.
If I've got to be honest, though, I think that the realistic fact is that what really makes a great product is the proofreading. And we all know that. And I have to say, some of the best proofreading on the planet done on this one. But, ladies and gentlemen, go out there and check out the Wiseguys demo kit. This is a preview of what you're going to get in the full setting. And what does it come with, Eric? It comes with a full adventure. It comes with pre-generated characters. It comes with a cover that looks absolutely amazing. And it says on the front Wiseguys demo kit, so there's no mistake in what is actually going to be inside this. And it comes with some background on gangsters in LA. No, Las Vegas.
Las Vegas.
Close enough. I know it had an L in it. LV.
Yeah. It has pictures in it.
It does, and it is one of the most beautiful looking books I've ever seen in my life. So check this out, ladies and gentlemen, because you will not be disappointed. And just, can I get a number crunch? What's the price on that, Eric?
0.
Oh my God. I can't believe that. I can't believe the price on that. So why have you not got it? If you haven't got it, why haven't you got it? Exactly. Go and get it now.
So, because you hate America. I mean, you hate America. I don't know, Harrison.
No, I've got it, so I don't hate America. And if you hate America, that means you're from North Korea, which is wrong.
It's wrong to be from North Korea.
Yeah, let's get a North Korean on here. Maybe really go international.
How would we do that?
You know what else has a price tag of free? Plug in Eric's butt. It's free. It's very soft, very supple, quite hairless, and really white. If you're interested in pictures, you could probably get access to it by emailing ericlamoureux@gmail.com. He will send you a picture of his extremely white butt, and you compare it to any kind of paper that you might have laying around. And yeah, there you go. I just plugged Eric's butt. It's fantastic. It's nice. It's soft. It's supple. It smells good.
And with that, we're going to give a shout out to some contact info. So if you want to email us, that will be at thewilddie@gmail.com. And also you can get in touch with us on Google+, the Facebook and YouTube. We're all at the Wild Die Podcast. And of course, we're always hanging out on the Nerds International community. And we are at Twitter, which is at the Wild Die. And of course, we are on Patreon. So if you like what we do, God help you, you belong in a home. But we are, you can go over to patreon.com/The Wild Die and donate us $1 if you like us and what we do. And now we will play the Patreon jingle. This is a shout out to all the Wild Die podcast patrons. This is a holler for the dollar. Sovia, Rob Tao, Peter Adams, John Peterson, Manuel Sams, Mr. Sag, Jason Connolly, Gus Busgill, Dashard, Andy Hall, Tony Asmodeus, Owen Ling, James Clark, Perry Chalmers, David, Eli Kurtz, Matthew J. Hansen, Murder Hobo, John Steve Pure, Mongrel, Bubbles, Frank Turflerd, Corey Dersham, Jeff Bernstein and CJ Stott. That's all the ones that we got. Just gonna do a few rhymes off the top
of my head. That's what I do, bruv. I'll murk till I'm dead. That's right, I'm the best in the scene. Every time you come... Oh, okay, never mind.
Thank you to new patrons, Frank Turfler, Corey Dersham, Jeff Bernstein, and CJ Stott.
Good names.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you, guys.
Those are good names. Good, strong names.
Frank
So,
Turpin's got a podcast out called Some Dude Musing About Things.
Yeah, liner notes. Yeah. If you like podcasts that are like 5 minutes long, which I do, that's the podcast instead of having to listen to us for an hour and a half. Wow. I don't know how you guys do it, but thanks for doing it.
Nobody's listening to this bit anyway. All right.
Yeah, when Eric listens to the podcast, he gets right up to the post, and then he turns it off. He's like, "Great podcast." Even so, he's only ever heard the first 5 minutes of this podcast.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Tommy. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your wisdom with us.
So this is Eric saying, grab your sword by the balls.
And this is Harrison saying, don't take the Chris.
This is Manuel saying, first strike with a lamb and your dirty tricks will have no mercy.
And this is Gary saying, keep your pants on, keep it fun. Thanks, everybody. We're out. Sorry, Chris. Sorry.
The Wild Eye Podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by Pinnacle Entertainment Group or official Pinnacle licensees. Any of the products mentioned on our show or appear on our website are the property and copyright of the respective owners. All music and artwork is used with permission of Pinnacle Entertainment Group. All items are used under fair use and educational and review purposes. All other items are the intellectual property of the Wild Eye Podcast.